Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 5, Darrell and Jungle Jingle. Hi, this is Isaac and you're Darrell.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Want you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about who you are outside of D&D.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm Darrell, and while I run a weekly group of D&D, outside I'm actually an accountant. I run an accounting department for a towing company, and I run it a very I don't know. I go to church every week, and I fill my week up with family and other good stuff. But D&D is certainly a big part
Hmm.
of what I do.
Yeah. That sounds very middle class America.
Yeah, up here in Canada.
All right, well,
Yeah,
middle class Western
middle
world, I
class
guess.
everywhere, right?
Good
Yeah,
point.
it's
Yeah, that's true.
just doing the doing. Just doing the thing best we can.
Yeah. Where in Canada are you at?
I'm in Ontario, right? So I'm about 3 hours from Toronto, which is the city everyone knows.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, I can make a day trip there, but I don't live close enough just to go shopping.
Right. I'm like that for San Francisco.
Yeah. Mhm. Right in the heart of tabletop Dungeons and Dragons. Aren't they in San
Uh,
Francisco? No, I got
uh,
it wrong. They're in Seattle. I got my wrong estimate.
yeah, I was gonna say they're up in Washington, so no.
I'm sorry.
Close to the heart of, I guess, programming. Um,
Programming. All right.
yeah, the house I grew up in, the Bay Area, was like 2 or 3 blocks from Facebook's main campus for a while until they moved somewhere else. But
Oh, home of Facebook.
yeah, now that place has been bulldozed and is now a bunch of new homes.
Oh, we'll see.
Um,
That's good. We use recycle, right?
yeah,
Even if it's home.
not quite, not sure that quite fits reduce for that. Yeah. How did you get into Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games?
So I guess technically I played my first game of Dungeons and Dragons when I was in grade 10. Played 2 sessions and was like, yeah, this thing isn't me, but I don't know, maybe it was the group, maybe it was a good bunch of guys. Okay, these were all friends,
Hmm.
but it just wasn't, I wasn't seeing the appeal necessarily. And then many years later, like Critical Role is it's nearing the end of its first campaign, kind of thing, and I hadn't even heard of them yet. But just kind of give you an idea here, um,
Uh,
right? I start listening to. I listened to an interview with Josh Whedon because he's on Big Bang, and listened to an old one, and apparently he's doing this crazy Acquisitions Incorporated thing, right? And so I was like, oh,
sounds
that's
familiar. I don't quite remember that, but
yeah, he was on like a Letterman. It was a quick little Letterman thing, and he was doing this Acquisitions Incorporated thing way back in the beginning, I guess. I don't know. I think I only discovered one video with him actually playing, which is interesting. But um, I also some other YouTubers on some video gamers like console gaming.
mhm.
Right, they started playing, and so I started watching, and I was like, "This is not what I remember," and could have just been grade 10 me didn't understand the concept of the game as well as maybe I could have, but I
Yeah.
found it very interesting. And so after watching a few live plays, I searched out a place on Meetup. I don't know. I think Meetup is in the U.S. as well, but um, and found like a local gaming group that rented space in a restaurant once a month, or
Yeah, so Meetup is kind of like Tinder, but for like meeting people for activities besides sex, right?
right, yeah. So, um, like, and I get it. I kind of get that. I thought it was strange when I was like, how do I find? I Google how do I find a D&D group? Meetup was one of the options. I was like, that seems strange, but it actually worked.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
and And so I started playing, and actually, after my very first game in person, the game I played, this time, I was like, wow, this game is really good. I didn't, there's a lot more I can learn, and I'd like to run this. Like, that was just kind of, my three thoughts
Cool.
right after. And so I played for a few more months, they meet once a month, right? So I played like a few more sessions, and then I ran a game for my daughter and my nephews, and that went well. I actually listened to some Matt Colville videos, and I for that first session I did Matt Colville's Delirian's Tomb from running the game episode one.
Oh, cool. All right. It's nice to have like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
uh,
I'm glad that worked out.
and all I had was the SRD, right? So
That's
with Matt's video and the SRD and right, and then coming, one of my nephews saying, "Oh, can I play this, UA thing?" I'm like, "Sure." I don't know what UA is, but play it and we'll figure it out. I didn't really care. I was just wanting to have fun with his
uh,
character.
yeah, no, starting without investing money in the hobby is great. Like that's basically what I did because I was using my dad's books and a friend's dad's books. So
Right.
like, you know,
Um,
if you don't have a dad that's buying books for you.
yeah. Yeah. Then I bought the Essentials kit, right? And that has Dragon of Icespire Peak in it.
Hmm.
And I started running bits of that for my nephews and still kind of playing. And then and that got me on a D&D Beyond, which as soon as I got on a D&D Beyond, figuring out how to make a character and how they interact, and then really kind of seeing the rules, I could almost like seeing various ways to build characters and how the character sheets kind of progress out of that with the math kind of already done, made me understand a lot of what I was reading in the rules a lot better.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
It's a very helpful resource. That's
Yeah.
just one of the things it does for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I could do it without a tool like D&D Beyond. I'm so integrated. I just buy. I don't have any physical books. I buy everything digitally, and and
Yeah.
kind of move from there.
I remember this is probably before you started playing, but it used to be that people would come out with like Excel sheets that would do that kind of stuff for you, and they like you just had to find like character creation Excel sheet, and there's all these people are coming up with different ones, so you'd have to find like your own one that you liked, and then maybe modify it a little bit based on your home rules or something like that. But yeah, that those things existed before like Wizards was making them, but
I
yeah, they
imagine
were
so. But I think D&D Beyond was just very accessible for me at the time,
yes,
right?
definitely.
So,
Yeah.
and the Essentials kit kind of came with like, get this adventure free on D&DB, right? So,
Hmm.
so then they had like their big sale they have once a year where all the books are $20 US,
Hmm.
right? So I just got a slew of books, including Player's Handbook, the DMG, Xanathars, and a bunch of others, some things I might want to run. And I got the Acquisitions Incorporated book because that was one of the live plays I was watching,
Yeah,
right?
cool. Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I don't know. And then in 2019, I put a call out on Reddit for looking for players for an online game to meet once a week. And I, silly me, I had a 6 questions survey. One of them was confirming that you could play on X day at X time. Right. So what can I find out from the other 5 questions? Not really a whole lot. I think the one of the other five was like, what's your Discord handle or some other way I can get a hold of you, right? So
Right. Yeah.
I didn't ask really any um, great questions. I just kind of was like, some of the answers were a little open ended, so I got an idea of what they were like, maybe from that, and I just kind of went by gut feel. I also took a couple of players from the in-person group I was meeting with. They also moved online on Discord, so I got a couple players from that group, and I kind of knew them a little more. But for the most part, we were all strangers, and it worked out amazingly great.
Great.
Which when you hear all the horror stories on r/RPG horror stories, what I did is a recipe for bad things that happen, I guess. But I think what it
Well,
is you just hear about the
yeah,
bad stuff. You never hear about the good stuff. So I guess
yeah,
I'm here to
yeah.
say, like, no, it's very possible that you go on, you get some 5 random people, and it works out amazing.
I would say more commonly you probably have a group of 5 people and it's just sort of okay, and then like 2 or 3 of them are good, and you try again, you add in 2 more fresh people, and then that usually works out.
Yeah,
That's more often what I've heard for groups, but you're lucky that it worked out the first time. That's great.
yeah. Well, actually, I think we started with 6 and went down to 5 in less than a month.
Yeah,
And that's
so
probably for the better, right?
yep.
Yep. Um, yeah, so that's how I started running, and I kind of ran a mishmash of of Acquisitions Incorporated. There's a little mini campaign in there. I mixed that with Dragons of Icepire Peak and some other one-shot material that I found on like Drive Through RPG and in
Uh,
DM's Guild, and some random BS that I made up myself. And, and I somehow amalgamated that into a small 1 through, I think we went to level 8 campaign,
okay.
right? So
Yeah, that's a decent amount.
that's a decent amount,
Yeah,
right?
I don't think most people go that much. So, and that took you how many years to go through from 1 to 8?
2-ish.
Okay, that that seems actually kind of slow to me now.
Yeah, yeah. I think I told him like, well, so I had heard a lot about session zeros, and so this is of course before Tasha's, which I mean their session zero thing is not as deep as a lot of YouTube videos you can find out there, right?
Uh,
And so I knew about a session zero when I first started. I set some expectations. One of the expectations I set was, like I only think this is going to go to to level 7, and we're going to have a long time between level ups, right? And that's just
yep.
it's a slow level up system, and that's kind of just how I plan on doing it. And I think that's actually how we lost the one guy so quickly. Was he was like, my third session level 1, I'm out of here. Of course, that was the last session of being level 1, but he was just like, no, I'm done. And I was like, okay, but at the same time, I was also like new, so I was like, I'm not setting the pace you guys move at. You guys, like there's direction, there's plot hooks, right? But if you spend, like they spent on that very first session, they spent, or session two, they spent 45 real in-game, like real-time minutes, deciding what's on the other side of the door before I basically said, you open the door. Here's what you see. Right, but they had like
Right.
listened for some things, and they had done some things. It wasn't like they were just sitting there and being like, do we open or not? They were just trying to figure out, try to get as much information they could about what was on the other side of it before they actually went. And I think as a DM, I'm better now at kind of some laying out some things, so we don't have those kind of roadblocks as much anymore, right?
Mm,
But at the same time, I said that I wasn't going to necessarily push them too much, right? I want them to have that autonomy to make these decisions, and
right. I think for a similar thing in my group at one point, they were doing that almost exactly the same thing where they were discussing about opening a door,
yeah,
and then the monster on the other side heard them and opened the door.
hmm yeah.
So there's a limit to how much of that conversation can realistically happen out of character.
I
At
guess
some
my
point, it has
problem
to.
was in this particular case, there was no monsters on this other door. It was a room to which there was a puzzle for them to solve,
Oh, okay.
right? And so it's like I had no way to like push them in necessarily. I was just kind of like, so eventually I was just like, you know what, I've had enough. You guys got enough. Someone's going to open this door, or you're going to turn back around. So are you turning back around? No. Then you're opening the door, and we just kind of moved on.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, you need to like just say like, I mean, it's metagaming, but you have to be like, guys, there's nothing there. Let's just move on. Like you're having this conversation, and it's not fun.
Yeah. But as I said, like I learned a lot in those first few months. I I mean, as I said, I don't know. I guess I had done a few things, and I felt like I was ready, and then a few more things that I had not been ready for kind of happened, and I learned more. Right, so
Yeah.
that's the way it goes.
Um, all right. Well, that's good to learn about your group. Let's turn about to your campaign world. So what's the name and maybe a physical description?
So let's start with the physical description. It is so the name of the campaign I just called it Jungle Jingle because I just want to give the idea that like, we're going to be traveling in the jungle, and that
I
is
meant
that is a
is
lot
that
of
the
what
name of
it
the
is.
campaign or the campaign world?
Yeah, that's the name of the campaign, Jungle Jingle. I don't know if I really like. It's just kind of known as the world to the players, right? So they
Okay.
know that that they're from sorry, they're from the valley, right? And it's like there's a town. The major town is Newport, and they have like all these little city place names and like little town names, um, right?
It's sounding like Southern California.
Yeah, yeah,
The
right.
Valley, Newport. Okay, yeah, I know those places.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not from California, so I didn't make that connection. But it's possible some of my American players did.
Yeah, I've gone on vacation to Newport, and the Valley is close by. So
See, very good. And so I guess I didn't really name it so much. And this kind of comes down to right. Well, so they're in a jungle world, right? And so the setting really like it's hot, it's steamy, it's raining all the time, right? But and if you have ever seen the the campaign Tomb of Annihilation,
yeah, no,
there's
I've played through it.
right. So you've played through it, right? And it's a bit of a mess of a campaign, but as a setting, right? In terms of being able to set in the jungle and different things you might come across, and they have a great map that I'm not using, but it is a great map. Um,
Yeah.
you got dinosaurs and amirages, and which I think are just adorable. Flying monkeys, all kinds of things. And so, as a setting book, it actually is fantastic. And so, I kind of take that as a base. But clearly, I'm looking to take it out of Cholt and right, and I don't have Port Narazau, and I don't have all these things here, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, kind of comes across as to why I made this place to begin with. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you like that setting, so
So
yeah.
I made this, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, so I made this world, right? There's a lot, so there is history and everything here, but I think what I did is I kind of made the campaign first, right? I said I want a jungle campaign, right? I talked to my players if they want something more open world or do they want
Mhm.
more linear, and they were unanimous in the idea that they want a more linear campaign. I was like, okay, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm creating. I'm creating for them specifically. Um, and so I thought about maybe like this quest, right? I want a jungle campaign where some of the things that I wanted to explore as a DM was I wanted the idea of having that actual exploration feature really front and center. So like if you were trying to do social, you would probably do something in the city and something high political, right? If that was your
Mhm.
main feature, right? And I think D&D has a lot of things where combat is the main feature, and that's
Oh yeah,
pretty
definitely.
pretty obvious, right? um, right. So I really wanted to do something where exploration was the main feature, and I thought the best way to do this is to give them essentially a quest, right?
Okay.
So you have this quest, and you're going to go this long distance, and hopefully at the end you'll succeed in your goals. into so what I did in the beginning is I gave them a map of this tiny little thing. So a map of their valley, right? And it's like the map of your valley. Right? You know that you have a long coastline, right? There's like a volcanic mountain kind of. So you have a long coastline on the west. You have a volcanic
Hmm.
mountain on the east, right? But the mountain range kind of curves around, and so you're actually surrounded on three sides by a mountain, one side by a coast, right? This is like the little major river, and these are the little towns, and these things because you guys, you are actually like guardsmen or protectors of the valley, right? You check in with Newport, you
Right.
get your orders or whatever, right? And why you're doing this or who you are, how you came to this, that's up to you. But that's kind of the setup I wanted here. And so, so they can turn around and be like, oh, yeah, I can say I'm a half elf, so I'm from where elves be in the north, right? Or I'm a dwarf, so I'm in the south where the dwarves are, right? And they get really comfortable with this thing here, and you spend a couple of sessions in here, right? And then all of a sudden you're in the volcanic mountain, and this is where your quest takes off, and you're headed east and everything you thought you knew, everything that you planned in your backstory, everything, that is still there and it's all true and it's part of your motivations, right? But you no longer have the safety of this map. And so I start by designing like you have this area here, right, that you're very comfortable with, and then you're
Right.
going to go and you're going to explore the very much unknown. You have no map, you have a general direction, right? And you meet people or tribes or whatever along the way, and that's kind of how I set it up. And so and that's why making my own world was so important, right?
Didn't want people to have like access to the answers of what was there.
No, it was less about the access to the answers what was there, but I wanted a world that was unbuilt so that I could build it as needs provided. Right?
Okay.
Why does someone make there's a few reasons why people make a world. One of them is just like, oh man, I have this idea for all this political structure and how trade routes go and like and they pretty much they plan everything in the world before they even get there, right? And I
Hmm.
really wanted something where I could create something. And I don't get me wrong, I have a history for this world, right? Like a deep
Right.
ancient history for this world, which is reasons why they find ancient cities and other ruins along the way, right? Why certain tribes are where they are. I don't want anything in this world to just be here through fiat. I want there to be a grounded reason why anybody would be in section A, B, or C.
Gotcha.
Sorry, just needed a drink.
Yep. Yep. It's all
Feel
good.
free to
Good around it.
applaud or
I like that your drink is also kind of like interacting with the background. It's going to see through.
Does it?
Yeah. Yeah. Lift
Oh,
up
oh my
yours.
goodness, it
Yeah.
does. That's the way it goes. Uh, right. So that ends up being the purpose of it. And so then we have this idea. Okay, so they're on this quest, right? We're definitely in a jungle campaign. We're going
Right.
to start at the volcanic mountainside. Only now we're heading east of it. So first, I start with a dragon. A dragon is inside the mountain, and a dragon is like, okay.
Yep.
I like undead. I have undead in everything I do. I don't know why. I'm just fascinated with D&D undead.
That's a pretty common enemy.
Pretty
It's
common enemy, right?
yeah,
Well,
simple. You don't have to think about it. There's no like. It's just yeah. It's evil. Kill it.
yeah, and I think that's the other thing too is I think I have a lot of ambiguity in terms of are these people good, are they not good, right? Just because you come across a cobalt, a couple may be nefarious, but most of them are probably benign and right.
Mhm.
And and my players kind of know this because in my previous campaign, like the lizard men were smart, intelligent potion makers for the most part, right? Which is not lore, right?
Well, it is for your campaign now.
But it is for mine, right? Yeah. So they know that I'm willing to like change any of these things on a dime. do however I think fits. And so I think undead. The reason I love them is because there are so many options in the Monster Manual, Volo's Guide, Modern Kinds, Tomb of Foes. Um, right, you can tell I have the legacy books,
Yep.
right? But there's so many options in these books, and because they're undead, they're unambiguous. There's no doubt that these are things you can just go and kill, and you don't have to worry about moral repercussions later,
Right.
right? And so, um, this is part of the things that they did. They found that brought them to the volcano, like from their safety zone, was that some creatures that were dead, supposedly, like some undead creatures appeared, and it was not something that was seen or known, right? Like everyone in the land there, in that little land of safety, little piece of Eden, dead stayed dead. You didn't come back as a monstrosity. So this was very strange. This would be very strange to those characters, right? And so the dragon in the mountain, right? He is protector of the lands on both sides, right? And he is in
Yep.
here in studies, and there's prophecy to go by, to go around there. And one of the things about, so in the ancient lore, there was a great war with dragons that were started, between dragons and humans, and then the allies of humans versus the allies of dragons, and right, and
So
essentially.
just humans and not other. Like I would think that if there was a war against dragons, there'd be more than just humans that
That's why I
signed
say
on
like
for
the allies
leadership.
of, right?
Right.
So,
Okay.
so essentially, like the elves and the dwarves, most of them, right? Would have allied with with the humans as well as many of the Baxies, etc. Whereas maybe like the Leonin and the Kobolds and the Yuan-Ti, right? They allied with the dragons, and you
Okay.
know, and some maybe more split, right? So like if you're a race that's more tribal, then maybe this tribe would have allied on one side, and this other tribe would have allied on the other. But does that make sense?
No, no, totally. That's
Okay,
just,
yeah.
different and
Right.
gives you a little freedom as well I was just curious about like it
Yeah, and
specifying
so
humans seemed a little different to me. That's all.
well, so and actually, in the end, because the human side lost, and so after they were starting to be eradicated, and so that's why this piece of Eden existed, right? Is that the mountains rose in order to give them a home, because it's kind of like a Noah's Ark kind of situation where. Um, it's like, well, we can't let you just die out, so we're going to give you a home here. But to
Think of
all
it
of
more like
their
a time
horror,
capsule.
like a little time capsule. But they remember that it was the humans that started the war. So even though they allied and now they're here, they like they remember, and humans are a little more distrusted, right? Like not outwardly hostile, but distrusted,
Okay.
right? So then this dragon, of course, right? There's prophecy where he is kind of protector of both sides, right? Where he has to kind of play that arbiter, right? So he wants to keep both sides separate, and that's why
Right.
he raised the mountain, or had help raising the mountain. And but the prophecy, of course, is if his eye should meet the sun, right? Then that will bring the telling of the next great war with dragons. And so he's afraid to leave the mountain because he's afraid to lay eyes on the sun ever.
Okay.
And that's why he sends emissaries, right? So these group of adventurers who are clearly capable of doing some things, maybe more capable than his industrious kobolds that inhabit his lair, right?
Okay.
He says, I need you to go out and do this for me. I need you to find out why the undead are rising and take care of it. That's what I need you to do. Right.
Okay.
And so that is their mission, their quest. Right. And you kind of give them some direction. Right. You give them some interesting landmarks. Right. So In Tomb of Annihilation, there is a floating rock that's shaped like a heart. And I like that idea, so that belongs over there. And because you start high up in the mountains and you can kind of get a glance overview, right? I kind of was like, yeah, you see a tower peeking, like sticking up of the forest, and you see a floating rock. The silhouette of a floating rock that's shaped like a heart has to be a trick of the eye, right? Because you're so far away, right?
Right.
And then of course once they descend the mountain, they don't have that view anymore. But that is certainly something that they want to head towards. They're just like, well, that looks interesting, right? The tower looks interesting, the heart looks interesting, right? And I guess from a metagame perspective, I'm sure my players are thinking, if I talked about it, there's got to be something interesting there. And there's got to be a reason. So they're just like, let's, we know that whatever it is east. We know that this stuff is east of us. So since we need some sort of direction, like they don't like to wander aimlessly. They're just like, we'll just say that we're headed in that general direction. We'll figure out when we get there what our next step is. And then, I don't know, weeks go by. Like, I could check my calendar because I have a game calendar. And for those of you who don't have a game calendar, you should be keeping track of time. I do believe that, honestly.
Yeah, I've got a game calendar for mine.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm curious how necessary it is. Like, could you just have stuff happen at like speed of plot and not really care?
Even if you just have things that happen at the speed of plot, and you're not using it to turn like an enemy dial or whatever, right? Like, the
Right.
enemy in so many days does whatever. You still should have a game calendar because then you can have holidays, and I guess you can just say, well, here's a holiday, it's here, right? But then also players can look back and so we can look back here and say, oh, they've been traveling for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks so far in game currently.
Yes, I found that aspect is very, very useful.
And then as soon as you say we've been traveling for 5 weeks, right? As soon as you can say, oh, when was I in the flooded city ruins? Oh, that was a week and a half ago, right? Because like in real world, that could be 3, 4 months ago. But as soon as they place in their character, oh, that was a week and a half ago, right? It means something, right? It actually adds so much more to the game that allows people to get lost in the game you run.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Verisimilitude, I think, is what it adds. Is that the right word? I'm sure it is. It's a word I didn't know until I started playing D&D.
I do like keeping track of time just so you can know how much something has happened. So like, yeah, there was an event that in my campaign, like real time happened a year ago, but in game time was like 1 month ago. So it was still like, not recent for the characters, but not far enough away that they would have like have trouble recalling details.
Right. I agree.
That ended up being important for that. Is that like, oh yeah, you know what that guy looks like. You only saw him a month ago.
Right. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong. In this game, there's only one god, and so it matters less. But like, if you were in a normal game of D&D and you were, who's the goddess of the moon? Sune?
Well, I'm using the Greek gods, so Serena for me.
Yeah, okay, so Serene for you, right? So like if you were a cleric of Serene, you would want to know when the next full moon is. Whenever that actually happens in game, right? As a character, you would just want to know when that is, right? Because that's important to your character. And the only way to know that is if there's a calendar.
Yep.
Right? And so there's a lot of other little things that are super important. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we call that a
no,
Tinder.
that's no, I mean there's some like there's a werewolf movie I watched once where there was like a full moon like 4 days in a row, and it was like it was a little funny to me that it was just like, oh, there's another werewolf attack because it's still a full moon. And I know some people like, because the full moon, like it looks full for about 3 days.
Yeah.
You can sort of justify having 3 days of full moon, but 4 felt like, okay, there's a writing mistake that happened here that allowed this to happen.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. I just found out through a different Matt Kova video that I guess TV scripts, are basically um, written in hours, right? And then because they have such a short lead time before they have to make an episode, right?
Yeah.
That some scripts are written as little as 20 minutes, and that's how you get writing errors like that, I'm sure.
Yep. There's different people wrote different acts of it, and so they had more werewolf attacks than they can actually. I mean, if you're following the rules, fit into a movie. But yeah, obviously they can change how werewolves work, and I should just accept that.
Yeah.
But anyways, yes, I love calendars. They avoid having too many werewolf attacks,
Yeah, they do.
among
Very good.
other things. So it sounds like your campaign is kind of more of a bottom-up design instead of top-down. Like where instead of designing like a whole world first, you were like, I want to do this type of adventure first.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I guess speaks to the kind of DM I am, right?
Mhm.
I want I want the space, right? So the idea of making a world is the chance to give me the space to say, "Oh, this is cool. I want to add this in," right? But it's also got to make sense in the world, right? So, so then you got a couple options. Either, I guess it depends. Like, does it make natural sense? Is what I want to do just fit into a jungle normally? Well, great.
Mhm.
I could put it anywhere, right?
Right.
Um, you know, am I looking to have a particular kind of uh, accent, like a tribe act in a particular way? Well, okay, sure. Is that because they live near water, or is that because they have little access to water? Are they more higher up in right? Are these a tribe that likes to live in tops of the trees or whatever, right? And so then I can kind of place them where I think it is. But also, like if I'm just like, well, this is something I want to put out my players uh, soon, like maybe after this next adventure, right?
Mhm.
Then maybe I can direct, like there's no, I don't have, there's only 20 hexes between point A and point B, right? I can make that 40 hexes or 10, right? you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I can put in front of them the environment that would then make sense, right? Because there's varying degrees of jungle in the jungle,
Yeah.
right? Which I hope is true because otherwise jungles become very boring. Uh,
I sure it can be true for you. Why not?
yeah.
Um, I know that's definitely true for the Alaskan rainforest, as there's varying variations there. I know people don't usually think of that as a jungle, but it's technically a rainforest. So
Right.
where there's thicker portions and it evens out, and it has even like more tundra stuff that's separating different sections of the rainforest.
There's large mounds that kind of come up with plateaus where there's not much on top of the plateaus. That really exists in our real world, right? And so, so I have those kind of things in this one as well. In fact, that's kind of where the players kind of are right now. Is that they're kind of like on a savanna kind of plateau where, because they're up higher, the trees haven't grown up there, and so you get this
Mhm.
large area that's mostly grasslands,
Uh-huh.
right? And which is jungle adjacent and fits very thematically. And so, what do they meet there? Well, Leonin. That makes sense, right? So I have a
Yeah.
little tribe of very, noble and a very chivalrous kind of, honor among all Leonin, right?
Okay.
Um,
So you mentioned like the Great War between dragons and dragons won, so humans were like banished to this little section.
yeah.
Um, what about the dragon civilization?
So dragons themselves are not as communal, right? And so,
Yeah.
so one dragon kind of looks out over a large, vast area, right? And so, um, the dragon that looks over this area, right, is in a mountain and he's afraid to leave,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, but he's still definitely a caretaker, right? Because he still sends out his emissaries. He's still, um, like he's not known. In fact, those who do know him are instructed like you can't talk about me because if too many people know about me, then they'll come in and they'll try to drive me out, or they'll try, especially those in the valley. right? You know, who are going to think dragons bad because of the big war, right?
Okay, all right. I
Uh,
was thinking that was separate. Uh,
right.
so
So,
this
so
dragon
then
is
there was
overlooking the
certainly
human enclave. Is that what's happening?
so like yeah, this little section here is it's not just humans, right? You know, but like other
Yeah.
races that were decimated in the war that were on the losing side, right? And
Okay.
so, you know, this dragon, of course, isn't acting autonomously, right? You know, this dragon, Kiwi, has his own history. He was a great warrior in this war. And as the war was ending down, it was clear that they had won, and they were still going around annihilating various villages and various settlements. Right, he was giving a very direct directive from an angel, right? Because in this world, there's one God and many angels.
Hmm.
And he was giving, you know, saying like, no, you actually can't allow um, all the races here to be wiped out. You actually have to protect some. You have to save some. You have to give them a home, right? That is
Okay.
his directive, right? And so this is not something that he sought out to do, but it is something he did because he was commanded by an authority higher than him.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? But there are other dragons, right? So if they were to travel a little bit north, right? You know, if they were to travel more north, they would probably discover a very barren, like almost deserty kind of land, and there's a dragon that surrounds that area as well, right? I know that off the coast, one of the things in the lore is, you know, that so one thing they do know is that like when ships try to go out too far, they don't come back, and when they do, like the few survivors that they have had, right, you know, have talked about. You know, a great dragon of the deep, and there's a dragon out there in the waters in the island areas over there, right? So
Hmm.
dragons kind of have their own large swath of area that they kind of look over and do and rule as they wish. I don't know what rule is right, but look over as they wish. Um,
I was gonna say own might be a better word for it.
own. Right. Well, and here's the thing I think too is this is the real twist, and the players are discovering this bit by bit. Is that you know, one dragon kind of went rogue, right? You know, and attacked and did some bad things, and the humans took that as an excuse to blame war on all dragons because they wanted the power that dragon bits give you, right? So they, you know, they want, you know, uh, you know, that after the one dragon that wasn't good, you know, that kind of did some bad things was slain. You know, the humans, took pieces, including the heart and everything else, and discovered, you know, we have some real magic properties, real power here,
Hmm.
right? You know, and so they decided very quickly that they were going to use this as a catalyst for war on the dragons, which sucked them all in. But that's like that was one dragon when most aren't like that. Just like one like people. Like there's so many more good people in this world than there are bad, right? You know,
Right.
but it's the people with ill intent that can really drive the uh, most negative consequences in our world.
Right.
Not that I'm trying to make it about our real world. I'm really not. It's a game of escapism in many ways, but
Yes. Yeah. But still, you want to. If you make it too different, then it's harder to get into your character.
right, exactly. So dragons
Um.
aren't evil, and but they're not necessarily malevolent, right? And so they're discovering, like the kobolds that they've come into, or the goblins that they come into. They weren't evil either, right? They were, they came across a tribe of goblins, and there was another monster, it's one of my own making, called an adorabilist, right? That
Uh-huh.
survives by charming, easy to charm peoples, and then gets them to serve, right? And so it can live in comfort because it's mind controlled a bunch of people.
So is it like a succubus or
No, it's an adorabilist. It's I don't know. I just made it up.
Well, what does it look like? I guess I'm trying to
So it
see.
looks like think of it starting as like a panther,
Hmm.
right? So I kind of thought of like, what if a displacer beast could actually do these other things instead, right?
Okay.
And so kind of, so it's definitely more cat-like, right? It has oversized eyes to which to make you
All right.
feel
All right.
sympathetic and kind and loving to it. Um, right, and even in itself is not malevolent. It didn't ask these goblins to do anything gross or abhorrent or anything, right? But it wanted to be served above the well-being of the goblins. So like their little village started, was like in squalor, right? They and their peoples were starving because they were giving all the food and all the best things to this one creature, right? Who was not necessarily who was taking for themselves and not really looking out for the best interest of everyone. And
A
so
little magical mooch.
little magical mooch, yeah. And so right, so the goblins themselves, they weren't evil, right? And so and I already know, like I already have ideas about what I want to do about the grung and the and Yuanti and any of the classic character types that I can put into a jungle, right?
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
that are not inherently evil in themselves at all. Um, in fact, as I said, there's like one God, and one thing that they're discovering, as there are a lot of very characters are very religious. We've had um, a player who plays a cleric, and he's not there full time, right? We have another one that has an acolyte background, right? We have another one that's a paladin, and they're discovering like no matter where they go, right? The symbolism, is all to the same deity, and the stories, right? All are of the same deity, and that
Hmm.
we came from this little safety alcove, and we were told like everyone on the side of the mountain was against us in the last Great War, right? Yet we're all unified by this one common thread, right? And it's not a big thing. It's not an overbearing thing in this world, right? But it is there in the underlying, and that when they are looking to try to find common ground, that is often the place they can find it,
So the one God.
right?
Um, okay. Yeah, that's definitely different than most D&D campaigns being set up.
Most, and I just thought, and to me, I just thought it'd be fun, right? Like I just thought it'd be a fun thing to add into this world. I'm making a whole new world, right? I can do whatever I want with it, and certainly with some of the other campaigns I ran, right? I have mixed up the Faerun gods and how they're some of their relations, and then many of them I kind of kept exactly as was written in lore, right? I just I thought, I've played in a lot of campaigns and I've run a couple where we were multi-theistic, reality. It's a multi-theistic reality, and I thought I'd try something a little different, right? By
Hmm.
having this different layer underneath.
Okay. Yeah. So is it like the one God is all powerful, or a sun god, or something else?
So its holy symbol is, in fact, three concentric circles with radiating lines that does look a lot like a sun. But it is like the God of all creation,
Okay. Yep.
right? And so because the sun is often one of the life-giving things, um,
Mhm.
right? That is kind of how that tied in there.
And so you have a bunch of angels as well. And I've always thought that, at least for Christianity and Catholicism, it's almost not monotheistic because of how prominently the angels feature and how people do prayers in Catholicism.
Yeah, and
So
I'm
are the
not.
angels kind of like that, or do people worship them for specific things, or it still all goes back to the one God? And
In this world, I think it all goes back to the one God. But the angels are a mechanical thing to kind of explain why different kinds of clerics and different kinds of paladins and different kinds of druids, right? Why they might exist in this world, right?
Mhm.
And so, so we have a one all-powerful God of creation, right? That has a world set in motion, and then uses the effective angels to help him carry him or her, help God carry out the plans, right? And so
Mhm.
very often these angels might choose a mortal champion, right?
Yep.
And so I gave five major angels, mainly to be uh, to kind of give players an idea of what might be here, right? And so, like, if I go right to my document here, what it says here, it says, "Here is your one true God. The God has created the rules and laws that govern the universe, have assigned them to angels to complete His work. There are many angels that cover all domains and they work in unison to complete their work as commanded. One of God's greatest gifts, of course, is free will. However, the angels will often grant power to those who follow closely in their domain to help them set the world on its path. Five major angels are usually represented in a small temple. However, there are a wide array of angels, and if one has made a significant impression in a particular area, that local temple may also have a representation in addition." And then I talk about five possible angels,
Okay.
right? So um, gives. Do you want me to talk about the angels? Is that
Yeah, yeah, sure. So it sounds like you have individual ones. It's not just like there's 100, 200 angels, but it's more like a limited, like a dozen or something.
well, so here the idea is I have five angels that kind of cover a large array of things, right? And then if players want to be like, well, that doesn't quite fit what I want, well, it says, okay, well, tell me about the angel that uh, that has significant area and you significant impact in your area that you knew about that you started to kind of follow, right?
Hmm.
And so it kind of leaves things again open. I think the whole purpose of having, a homebrew world like this is to have the space to create what you need to fit, to fit, right? That you have that
Hmm.
verisimilitude, so you don't have a harsh break here.
Right,
So
right.
the five I started, and I just used Google Translate and came up with like. Different languages. Like Vilmark is the angel of wilderness, nature, and exploration, also agriculture and fishing. Right,
Hmm.
Vilmark's a real word in some language, I forget. And then some of these I may actually mispronounce. Some of them I changed slightly the spelling, but I took the
Uh,
base of the word. So we have, sorry,
Vilmark, I think is German.
German,
Yeah.
quite possibly. Uh, Sentia, right, is the god of truth, knowledge, discovery.
Uh-huh.
Right. Zangai is of warriors, justice, and vengeance. Iwu of law, merchants, and government. And Delart of craftsmanship, art, and music, and other creative endeavors such as smithing, weaving, and tailoring. And
All right.
then that being said, right, um, due to like the cleric who's kind of there part time, was like, well, I want to be like a light cleric, right? Like the subclass I want to play is a light cleric,
Yep.
right? Which is all like fire and such, right? And he says, and I was really thinking of like, so we had a discussion that went back and forth, and it came out that he was thinking more like, using fire as a form of renewal,
Hmm.
right? And I says, okay, so that's great. So then we have Kosuth of fire, Kosuth of destruction and renewal. And that's really kind of the note there. And I let him fill in a lot of the gaps of how this ain't part time as well. So
Yep.
I didn't expand the notes like crazy, but I have enough there, so I have an idea of like how this angel might kind of interact, right? Um, and and give him a place in this world, right? Where like, okay, so we use fire to like kind of destroy and renew, and so we can have rebirth, and
Yep.
so then we have imagery of things like the phoenix and such. But he still has, the three concentric circles with the radiating lines as the holy symbol, right? Because your main holy symbol is still that of the one God in the world.
Yep. Yeah, I was about to say, oh, his holy symbol could be something like a pine cone, but yeah, good point. Still has to be the one God.
Right. So that's kind of an example there where we collaborated to make a piece of this world that I wouldn't have made on my own, right? But it now exists as a real canon piece of the world, and it gave him a magic weapon that he found called um, Kotsu's proxy, and there's lore behind that he discovered that it actually belonged to the previous champion of Kossuth, which is many decades apart, or at least a decade apart. And in that him finding this piece obviously is not an accident, that it somehow
Right.
was placed in his path.
So you mentioned that there was a plot where their players were trying to get somewhere to do something.
Yeah, right. So I'm very vague on purpose. No.
Well,
So
I mean, there's an element to the podcast where like your players are probably going to listen to this, so I know there's some stuff that people don't want to reveal. So like if you have trouble answering that question, that's okay. You can not.
I have actually very good players who don't metagame very much. So even if they did know, they probably wouldn't uh, use that information. I have some surprises that I won't talk about, so that they can still be surprised,
Okay.
right? But so tentatively, right now, their goal is the heart rock that seems to float in the sky, and that certainly marks a very very key point in the campaign. Uh, where they're going to meet up with a key NPC. And right, we've kind of already had a set. We've had some sessions where they've already met one of the real, actually bad guys, bad girls in this case. Right, and I thought there was a very funny moment here where because this person is in fact a lich. So when the paladin pinged for undead, and the only person that came back was this NPC that was traveling with them and super helpful and helped them get around a lot of things, right?
Uh,
As they were going after this treasure in this city here, in the city ruins here, right? The paladin turns around and was like, "Everything is fine," wink wink, and like no one responded to it. Like the Warforged was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know human interaction content here. Like, so like no one took that.
I don't have eyelids. What are you doing?
Right, yeah. And right, so then of course the NPC's like, "Oh, is there something wrong with your eye, dear?" Kind of like, "Oh yeah, right." So
Yeah.
right, and then of course the NPC ended up taking the treasure, just took the treasure, bamf out of there. And then he discovered that a lot of the hazards that this NPC was able, this bad person who they didn't know at the time was able to help get around, is because she actually has control of many of the undead traveling around these ruined cities. In fact, these undead working for her, looking for the same treasure that they went and got,
Oh.
right? And so when she got the treasure, she was basically able to say, "Okay, don't let them leave the city," and she bamped out of there.
Yeah. I'm doing a very similar just adventure, not a whole campaign, for my players right now.
Yeah, I find that
Where
if you put a bad guy in front of them and then they get away, my players hate them. Just like they hate them. Like nothing makes them more angry, right?
I there was a article I read once about like a way to motivate your players if you really want them to go to some place and they're not willing with any other plot hook, is to have someone steal something from them and then go off towards that location. Then your
Yeah,
players will always follow that person and go that way.
yeah,
So it
they want
sounds
their
like
stuff back.
yeah, basically the same thing where she the stole like the final thing they were trying to get at that adventure. So it's like that was theirs, right? So now they have to go They have to go after her.
Right. Exactly. That's it. So this group has been traveling now for 5 in-character weeks, which has been far more than that in real life, obviously. Um, and they still haven't even made it there, right? Because the destination isn't the point. The journey is. And
Mhm.
I'm working really hard to make the discovery of what's happening, how this land changes, and how different peoples they might encounter interact with the same environment that they're with. Right? I'm working
Mhm.
really hard to make that continuously interesting, moving the plot forward. Right, and just the idea that they can look off on the horizon and say, "We're still headed there," right? This gives them the direction that they need to go, right? And allows them
Yeah.
to enjoy the exploration as it happens.
Yeah,
Um,
it's I had a
but
flash that's very similar to like the plot of Star Trek Voyager, where they have a destination, but it's so far off that it's really more about the journey for the TV episodes.
right, yeah, I think I've watched like the first 5 episodes of Voyager.
Yeah, I mean the overarching plot. Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing similar at all, but
Yeah.
still,
No,
you
but I
get
like
the
that
idea.
idea. No, I think you're right because their idea is Voyager was trying to find their way home,
Yep.
right? But through that anomaly, they were like, if they just went straight there, they would never get there, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
they would die. Yeah, because they were like yeah, ridiculously far away. Yep.
ridiculously far away, right? This is accessible, right? But this is more like Frodo's journey in Lord of the Rings,
Ah,
where
yes.
right, where you can point to it on a map and it's accessible. You can get there eventually, like in your lifetime. But like the journey to get there is arduous and perilous, and there is no Mordor. I mean, don't worry, I'm not doing Lord of the Rings, but
It didn't sound like there was.
no, they are. I know that where this floating rock is, it really kind of marks the halfway point, right?
Oh, okay.
So, but when they get to the floating rock, they're going to have another chance to kind of look out and see kind of where they're going. And there's going to be, because there's going to be a knowledgeable NPC here, right? There's going to be information here. So there's going to be um, a lot of real new directive, right? So when they get here and they uncover, even with no roles, they'll have some idea of where to go, right? And of course with more investigation or more things that they may decide to do, right? The more they get involved with what's here, right? And hopefully I'm setting this up before they get here, right? So it's not just going to be like, oh, you're just wandering around, getting here, and then hearing all this new stuff, right? I'm building the world, to them, and throwing bits of the world at them, building up their history, building up their future, so that when they get here, they're going to have a lot of things to do, and there's going to be a lot of things to kind of look over, and that's going to give them new direction for the next large length, if that makes sense, right? Where again, because they and I'm planning on doing it in this way because my players reacted so well, like have gone along so well with it, with this halfway point, right? They keep referring back to, this is the direction we're headed, and we kind of have something that we're headed towards, so we don't feel like we're aimless. And I
Mhm.
realize like that's important to them. So I want to make sure I give them something, even if it is far off the distance, that makes them not feel like they're aimless, right? In the meantime, for individual sessions, I also want to make sure I'm giving them clear plot hooks, clear things for them to do, and things that they uncover they may decide that they want to do themselves, right? Because how they interact with the world changes the world. It changes how certain things may fall out. They know that they know from my DMing them before in other
Mhm.
campaigns that I will 100% make what they do have effects on what may happen in the future, right?
It is always very rewarding to get to like an epilogue session for a campaign and get to fast forward and see all the effects of those decisions.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what I got there. There's some other things I think I've done that I'm proud about here, actually.
Well, one of my other questions I had for you was about you mentioned exploration like short rest and resource system. That sounded kind of interesting. You want to talk more
Yeah,
about
that's
that?
actually where I wanted to go. Look at that. We're
All
on
right,
the same
perfect.
page. Woohoo! So um, let's talk about CR and the Adventuring Day. Man, does that not awful? Like, who runs that way, right? It's the idea behind a lot of the what works in D&D is, you're supposed to have so many, um, so many adventures between long rests, right? So many
Yeah, I think
encounters,
it varies a
many
little bit
things.
between edition, but like I think the basic idea is that you're supposed to have
Like
four
five.
separate CR1 encounters per day, if you're a level one adventuring party, and that should exhaust your resources enough that at that point you need to take a rest, a long rest.
Sure, and that makes sense. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on the CR system, but what I did here is I said, look, I don't like having counters or random stuff happen for the sake of randomness, right?
Hmm.
Doesn't mean that they're not going to just come across some random gorilla tearing through the jungle or something, right? Right, or some, or they might just come across some random nest of snakes. That can happen. Don't get me wrong,
Hmm.
right? But if I run a whole campaign where all I'm doing is constantly rolling dice, and on in any session, right? We have 3 encounters that I didn't actually prep before session that we just kind of had, because the dice said this belongs here, and then you get some weird stuff like, why am I having the Terrafolk attack people in the savannah where they're already leaning, right? Like,
Hmm.
what are the Terrafolk doing here, right? Um, like I like things that so if they're going to encounter something, I want it to have impact on them. I want to have impact on terms of it's got to, ingrain them more in the world, move the actual plot forward for that adventure, move the plot forward for the campaign as a whole, right? Give character progression, right? Or it's got to do something. It can't just be random. I did not want to have that,
Yes.
right? And so
Yeah, yeah, I can think of something where I did for that was I'll have like random encounters at the start of an adventure, but usually it's something like there's a plague in this region, so there's like a diseased wolf that attacks them or something like that. Where
right,
it can feel random, but then once you get to the next step of the adventure, you realize that oh, there's like rabies that's going around, so that's the problem you have to deal with was the reason that that wolf attacked.
right, perfect. So you're on the same page here. So I said, I want you to like. I don't want you to spend like you're supposed to have days of travel, right? Like you're gonna have if this is an exploration campaign, you're not in the city or you're not on some road. You're gonna have literal days of travel,
Hmm.
right? And theoretically, as per the rules, you could have a long rest every single day, right? And therefore, anytime you encounter anything, you could go Nova on it, knowing that like I can't throw enough at you in any kind of given day. So we
Hmm.
said what we're going to do is we're going to do a short rest system where you get a long rest when you're in a safe place, as determined by me, the DM. So you get a long rest when you're in a safe place, and when you're camping out in the jungle, you spend your time getting a short rest, but you take the length of time one normally takes for a long rest, right? And so we have an 8-hour traveling day, 8 hours of camp setup, takedown, and whatever other downtime activities you want to do on a daily basis, and then
Hmm.
literally 8 hours of sleeping because you need that, and
Yeah.
and you get a short rest. And if you don't, if you want to have a quick take up and take down and no downtime or whatever, you can push yourself, right? And travel for 16 hours that day, right? And then possibly, there'll be a roll for exhaustion. That's the way I'm going to run it. You know, there's going to be a roll for exhaustion, so you may be exhausted, you may not, and exhaustion lasts until you get a long rest,
Yep.
right? So then that risk as well becomes more even more of a choice, right? More of an actual choice, right? Because if you get exhaustion, you may have it for a number of sessions, right? And it
Yeah.
begins to
Yeah.
mean more, right? And if you do it for too many days in a row, right? Now I haven't put in front of them a moment where, well, that's not true. I have, and I've done it once so far where I've chased them, right? And they said, you know what, we want a full short rest. Fine, no problem. I rolled the dice, and your short rest was interrupted. Right, you were found by your pursuers, right, or some of your pursuers, right, and so then they took care of all that, and I said, okay, so the idea of a short rest is over now. You're not going to get that, but you can stay here, and I'll roll again to see if more pursuers find you, right, because the situation, they knew that we're talking hundreds of undead army essentially, right, and only like half a dozen found them, kind of thing, right? Or probably
Right.
more. I forget the exact numbers, but right, so I'll roll the dice, and maybe you'll be discovered again, and maybe you won't, or you can leave and travel and risk exhaustion, and that is kind of where you're at here, right? So I'm presenting real options, real choices, that right, and so they chose to move on,
Yeah.
and
I've always thought D&D is pretty cool when you have hard choices like that for players.
yeah, because choices matter, right?
Hmm.
Hopefully in your games, choices matter. Hopefully,
Yeah. Yeah.
consequences are a thing, and right. So, yeah. So then, so that's like just the rest system, right? But there are so many other things in D&D that take away the exploration bit, right? And so resting takes 8 hours. Heavy armor is not conducive to the hot, steamy jungle. You can wear it. I'm not saying you can't, but I am letting you know right up front, wearing it will require roll for exhaustion at the end of each traveling day. I don't care. I'm just saying that's what it is. People don't wear it because it's too hot, it's too steamy, right? And we're talking about
No.
like I
Yeah,
have
definitely. Like, I think that's something where like knights didn't wear it while they were traveling. They just brought it with them for battles. You'd put it on before a battle. You wouldn't wear it for 8 hours.
right. Right, you would wear it just to fight in, and then you would take it off because it's crazy hot,
Yeah.
right? And obviously no one wears heavy armor, so yeah, go figure. Though there's some medium armor. That's medium armor people in our group. I kind of let that go. Uh, I don't want it to be like I don't want Versiduma to really take over fun.
Right. Yeah.
Right, so kind of having this in there in kind of like my custom rules for this campaign only, because this isn't how I run everything, right? Obviously,
Hmm.
right. Kind of gives them the idea of like, okay, it's hot and it's rainy, and it does rain every session. They're in the savannah, so I haven't actually talked about rain because it hasn't rained there.
Hmm.
Although they're dealing with some other weird weather anomaly, so maybe they hadn't really quite noticed it hasn't rained yet. But every time they've been in the jungle, it has rained literally every session, and I don't roll for will it rain. I roll for how long it'll rain and how heavy it'll rain, right? Right. So and so that's what the random rain is, right? So they know I'm rolling for rain, but they've come to realize very quickly, like, oh no, it's just going to rain every day. Why not?
Yeah.
We're in a rainforest, right? Um,
Yeah.
I said everyone's expected to track inventory, food and water, might be able to forage and hunted, right? But where everything has a weight, and if something comes in without a weight, I'll go into their character sheet and I will add a weight to that item.
I was going to ask you about food because I felt like the 5e rules for food are extremely silly.
You need to consume one ration a day. I don't care, right? A ration for the weight they give you for, like whatever. I don't care. I just want the idea of like, but there's no economy. You can't buy rations. They're not going to a village saying like, "Can I give you gold for rations?" Right? So at some point they got to make a kill, and they got to like salvage the kill, and how many rations can they get off this raptor they just killed?
Well, what I'm talking about, so that the food rules are that you can go 3 days plus your constitution modifier without food. And then if you eat 1 day's worth of food, that counter resets to 0.
Okay.
So the
Every
within the
day you
rules, like,
don't eat your ration of food, you roll for exhaustion.
yeah, that's
That's
that's more reasonable.
that's it. So every day they consume a ration of food, and the Warforged's like, "I'm a Warforged." I'm like, "I don't care. You can take your rations of everybody else, and you can pretend that it's like, like, oh, I'm taking the oil from the fish we had, and that's my ration. But yes, you
Mhm.
too also need to consume a ration from a metagame perspective." Because I don't care that you're a Warforged. I think from a metagame perspective, you're not going to get around this just by choosing a race, right? Because again, I'm trying to make this exploration pillar a real thing, right? And
Well, I could think of like, so he's made of like wood and metal, and those parts are gonna corrode and rot. So
mhm,
you have to do maintenance on those. It's
right,
not necessarily fish oil, but yeah, no, I get the idea
yeah, yeah, and he can flavor it however he wants. He can take whatever pieces of the ration that he wants, but his ration count's got to go down.
there. Yeah, I could see his rations weighing a lot less than everyone else, though, if he wanted
So
to play that.
yeah, he hasn't argued that point, so I'm not worried about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, whatever.
Right? We have a character who, the one who has the acolyte background, has a portable alchemy kit as a custom homebrew item. It's an alchemy kit that has a little tiny portable space, just big enough for one potion that can heat up and brew and be safe in here, so that you can toss in your bag, and the alchemy kit can jumble all around and everything, but the potion inside is always upright and safe,
Cool.
right? And so if something needs some time to brew or whatever, right? So he has this, and then, so he's finding pieces, and I got something off of the DM's Guild, and that kind of broke things down into, you could say it's a kind of a flower or whatever, but essentially it's either an air forging item, or land, or water, or vigor, or corruption, or fire.
Uh-huh.
I think I got them all. Uh, right? And I'm just like, oh, that makes sense. And then you have potions, and the potions are like, like, oh, this requires, like, this requires a vigor and a water, or this requires a fire and or earth, or this requires a vigor and one of these other things you may have,
Uh-huh.
right? And so he has to go around, and he has to, like, if he's trying to get something for this out of a creature they salve, then that might mean that they get less rations out of. They might be able to salvage out of it, right?
Yeah, because he's got to use like the liver as a vigor ingredient or something
Or
like that.
something. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, but at the same time, he's also spending his downtime, digging up rocks, and like, oh, is this special ore for like earth, or is this like, nice little flower, or like, are any birds I can shoot down, and special enough feathers for air, or,
Or is it just dirt?
hmm?
Or when he's digging in the ground for special ore, is it just dirt?
Is it dirt sometimes? Sometimes. Right. That's why there's a roll. That's why there's some randomness in this game.
Yep.
Right. But of course, all that weighs down on him as well. I have a thing here. Magical food and water may support your body, but does not sustain your mind and soul. And no one wants to test this, because they know that I own and have read. Well, my girlfriend owns, and I have read it, Call of Cthulhu, and so they are very, very afraid to put this to the test.
Oh, have, so I don't know if fifth edition has the sanity rules that third edition had. Oh, it does. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that they exist. I have my own ideas of what might happen.
Okay. All right.
Right? And they're not, like, I have ideas of what might happen, but they haven't pushed it at all. And in my head, I'm like, you know what, like, if you need a ration, and you need to get by, and so you have like good berry for a day or something, right? And you do that for one day, and then the next day you hunt and you kill some amorage, and you're just like, okay, we got some real meat, we got some real mactions now, right? Then right, then that's not actually going to have a lasting effect, right? But if you're going to be constantly relying on Goodberry for days on end, right? Then yes, you're actually going to have some trouble.
Yeah, I think a consequence like that is necessary for an exploration campaign, because otherwise a lot of the challenges just become I use a first or second level spell and the problem goes away.
Okay.
Um,
So then let's talk about my disallowed list. I don't have counterspell in any of my games. You play any game with me, counterspell doesn't exist. My enemies don't have, like, the bad guys don't have it, the good guys don't have it, just doesn't exist.
yeah,
A large
yeah, you always want
reason,
to be
a large reason
balanced
why
in that.
is, as a player and as a DM, I've played with counterspell and it's just unfun on both sides of the table. And so I don't like it because I don't believe it's fun. My players have never complained about not having it. Yeah, and so all good. And then I have this general in all my campaigns. Ever since Tasha's came out, I have just flat out said any summoning spell that does not come with its own stat block. Anytime it says look in the monster manual or your DM will have a stat block, I'm like, no, you can't use that spell. Pick one of the ones. Pick the same spell that has a stat block and use that instead.
Okay.
Right? Because I think they scale when you upscale spell slots, when you upscale with proficiency, right? Your summons scale, you get some options, right? So there's no need not to. But for this campaign, in addition to, we do not have the identify spell allowed.
Oh,
Comprehend language, unless you get it by some other means than just a normal spell list. Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to like toss in a comprehend language magic item, like a consumable, where you can do it once and fine, right? I think at the time when I wrote that, I thought there was a warlock invocation that has comprehend languages, and certainly I think if my warlock player turned around and said, "I'd like to know comprehend languages. Can I use my next invocation on it?" I'd probably allow it.
I think there's one subclass, I'm not sure it's Warlock, that gets it at like level 10 or something like that. I don't even remember what class that was though.
So if you get it from a subclass feature, fair game,
It's
right?
not exactly overpowered at level 10 either.
It's not exactly overpowered at level 10, yeah. Tongue's not allowed, right? Tiny Hut not allowed unless obtained by some other means in a spell list. But
Yep. Yep.
and that's because I have already put into previous games a consumable magic item that's essentially Tiny Hut. Note, however, Magnificent Mansion is not on this list. I figure by the time they get the spell Magnificent Mansion, if they want to use, what is it, like a 5th level spell slot to get a long rest in, sure.
Yep.
Right, if you have a 5th level spell slot at the end of your day, um, you know, right. So,
Seventh level. I just looked it up.
sorry,
Seventh level.
7th level spell slot. Yeah,
Yeah.
7th level. By the time you're at 7th level and I'm throwing weird stuff at you, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Then
right?
it's
'Cause
your
What,
choice
what
to use
level do you get
that. Yep.
7th level spell slots at? Aren't you at like 15th level or something?
13th, but yeah,
13th. Yeah,
still.
yeah. So I haven't done a lot of games past. I haven't played in a lot of games past 10. I haven't run a lot of games past 8. So this will
It's
be interesting when
it's a
they get
different
there.
it's a different game at that level.
I do plan on it going fairly high. I have no idea how high it'll go. It's milestone leveling, so it'll be what it is. Um, but I also uh, I do plan on letting it get into the teens, so we'll see how we get. Right, so you get an idea of the disallowed spell list.
Yep.
I gave a small buff to rangers to anyone who want to play a ranger, and there's no rangers in my party. But I turned around and told him, use the new Tasha's Cauldron of Everything if you want. And then if you're using Favored Foe, I said I removed the concentration of it. However, I said it won't stack with like Hunter's Mark or Hex kind of thing. I thought that was a fair thing. So that way they can use their awesome concentration stuff. Now, when you look at 1D&D, Rangers, their proposed is you just know the hunter's mark instead of doing favorite foe, and it doesn't cost, and it's not concentration for you specifically. So it's like, I feel like I'm right on line with kind of what they're doing on playtesting. So I was like, oh, good, I got there first.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit surprised no one would choose Ranger in an exploration-based campaign. It feels like the perfect class for that.
It does, right? I thought, you know what? Well, they made some really interesting things with Tasha's Cauldron and everything, Ranger features, and I was giving it a little bit of an extra buff or a bump, and
Yeah,
I was looking forward to having a Ranger, and no one wanted. I'm like, okay, fine, that's cool.
yeah,
You play what you want to play. I'm also the feeling like I could have done this with all rogues. I don't care. Like,
yeah.
right? I mean, the players might. If there's too many rogues, they might be like, well, then what's special about me? But and you know what? Like, there's a bit of that. Like, we had a new person join, and they had an idea of being an alchemist, making potions and such. And I was like, oh, that's such a great concept. But we have someone doing that space, right? So
Right.
then there's this conversation of like, I mean, if you're diehard on it, we can have a conversation. We can bring them into this, right? If there's other concepts, characters that you have in mind, then that might be another way to go. And he's like, well, yeah, no, there's two others actually. I was really thinking about hard, So then he brought up two more suggestions, and he went with one of those because it's kind of hard when you're kind of like. Uh, Especially when you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, I want to make like potions and such, right? And you have one character who's doing that. This isn't a class feature, right? This is clearly something that's inserted extra in. I guess technically the Artificer has an alchemist subclass. Is that right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Which clearly I don't know all about, but I know I technically own it. Just haven't really, because it's in Tasha's. But it's just kind of there. I figure when someone else plays it, I'll learn more about it.
Yeah, they had to have the alchemist one in the Cauldron book.
Yeah, that makes sense. So kind of, so those are the kinds of things that we've done, right? So we're tracking weight, we're tracking items, we're we've changed the rest system. I have certain things just not allowed, and everything that other than the two things that I just are kind of my standard go-tos. All the other stuff are disallowed in service to making this an exploration campaign, right? Basically I said,
Yes.
like, I can't let you shortcut it at such early levels, right?
All of those cuts that you made make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So and all that was discussed at session 0 as well, right? Like I had this discussion and I gave the players an opportunity to say, that I don't like, that I was really hoping I could do this with a character and I would have this as a spell maybe or something, right? But actually my player said the same thing that you just said. All that makes a lot of sense for what we're trying to do here. So, and I think good conversation kind of helps grease that wheel, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I did is I have upgrading magic items. So they have this connection with Kiwi. Not all the new players. Some of the new players don't, but it's not really matters at this point. The idea here is I wanted to I didn't want to necessarily there's not a huge economy, so I'm not giving a lot of treasure, right? They have this goal, right? I'm really making, the idea of the undead rising is a real problem for everybody, right? So everybody's concerned. So no matter where you are from, whether you're east of the mountain, west of the mountain, right? From the plains or from, the deep jungle or along the river, it doesn't matter, or the Great Library, because there's a great library as a destination point. this is a problem that needs to be taken care of. It's affecting everybody, no matter where you are. And so every time they kind of meet a new group of tribe or a new group of people, right? I'm trying to have the adventure of the day kind of thing, really kind of lay fealty to this being the central problem. So we get the idea that there are some underlying unifying threads, right? We have the same deity, we have the same problem, right? And even though, like our forefathers were opposed, we actually have a lot in common here, right? And so I'm not giving out a lot of treasure, so I have a lot of things, the magic items upgrade, right? So
Are they tied to player level or like an accomplishment? Or I had one in my campaign where they had to like feed the item treasure for it to upgrade.
very good. Uh, if you are playing your characters' bonds, flaws, motivations, right? And you're at a decent character level, I'm going to consider what your next upgrade is. I have one player who rides a hippo, as she's a paladin, right?
Classic.
And her fine, and she has the fine steed, and it's a hippo, and I'm just like, you know what, like, yeah, it's your hippo, and you can dismiss it and recall it and whatever else. It's basically like a familiar, but it's a riding animal, and she wants to ride this thing everywhere, everywhere. So like I'm thinking, you know what, I think she's almost due for mountain combatant, right? I think that's the name
Hmm.
of the feat.
Yep, yep.
Right? I think she's almost due for that. And why is she almost due for that? Well, because she's doing the thing. She's already trying to do the thing, so it makes sense that she would get better at it, and so she should get it. But also, like, we have a warlock uh, who has the Pact of the Chain. He's very involved, talking to his familiar from the Pact, which in this case actually is a succubus, and sees this familiar as the conduit to his patron. So he doesn't speak directly to his patron, right? He speaks through this familiar conduit.
Okay.
Right, and when he does things this patron wants him to do, right, then he's received a couple of boons because, well, so he's done something that his patron wants to do, so he received a boon. He's done something Kiwis wanted to do, so he's received a boon from that. So he has a couple of them already, right? And I just kind of like, uh, and so I kind of added to their weapon on their character sheet, just like from a mechanical point of view. D&D Beyond allows us to like add things to items,
Hmm.
right? But from narratively, it may or may not actually come from that, and it doesn't really matter, right? The idea
Yeah,
here
yeah, that's
is
true.
is I'm not throwing a ton of treasure. The treasure I am throwing, a lot of it is consumables, right? But for lasting things, I'm making sure that you have very character thematic things that are upgrading naturally from your ability, from your, so like it doesn't, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Like, um, why would I find this amulet here that would give a warlock specifically an extra spell slot? Why would that exist in the world? But because he did something for his patron, his patron's giving him an extra spell slot with
Or you could have like
consequences.
a story reason, like a fighter has the sword that their master gave them before they left on the adventures. They don't want to throw that away just because they found a +2 sword that's better.
Right? You got better. Why can't it just be +1 and +2? Because you got better,
Hmm. Okay.
right? Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So I'm kind of taking that, and then I don't make people roll. I don't use standard array. I make custom arrays for their characters. And so with here, I thought, you know what, I want to really kind of give them some really strong magic items, and they're going to go to a high level already, right? And so
Hmm.
I really shorted them on their ability scores they get to start with as level 1 characters.
This is very different.
This is very different, right? Oh, but Here's the thing about balance. Here's my theory about balance, right? CR doesn't matter, right? There is no balance between enemies and players. So where do you get actually a misbalance is when players are not balanced with each other.
Right.
That's my theory. We'll prove it. I don't know. I haven't proven it yet, but I'm trying to here. That's my theory. And so, to me, it doesn't matter like if everyone has great, amazing stats or if everyone has low, crappy stats. If everyone has similar stats, then we can make a game and it works because we don't have one person dragging everybody down, or we don't have one person, taking care of everything. And then if that person falls, it's automatically a TPK because no one else can do anything.
Yeah.
Right. But this is the first time with this group that I said, you know what, I'm gonna give you actually a choice. I said, if you want to if you have a multi ASI head dependent character, paladins often need strength and they need charisma, right? And they still need constitution and a bunch of other things, right?
Yep.
So if you need, or if you're thinking of multi-classing, we need a bunch of 13s, right? Then you can go, you can just take 8, 10, 12, 13, 13, 15. Or if you want to be specialization, right, then you can do 9, 10, 10, 11, 13, and 17. And so this gives you that one thing where you are super good at and a lot of things that you're kind of mediocre at, right?
This is sounding pretty similar to Point Buy. It's just you've already sort of optimized it for choices for people.
Yeah, well, it's actually, if you compare that to Point Buy, it is lower than Point Buy from a mathematical standpoint.
I mean, yeah, but Point Buy is decided by the DM for how many points you get. So.
Okay, I guess I was just doing the Point Buy out of the whichever book it was, DMG, I think it is, or whatever.
Yeah, I forget if it's DMG
Right.
or Player's Handbook, but yeah.
Whatever, the one that's actually preloaded into D&D Beyond, right?
Right.
But I mean, I have run other campaigns where I've said, where we were significantly better, right? And it was easy to get, it was, where characters was easy by the time you reached, if you spent your 4th level ASI on actual ASI, not on feats, right? You could easily have a 20 and an 18, assuming you put your ratios in the right places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And that's a pretty powerful character.
Yeah.
But everyone had that option or that ability, right? So, and I found that worked out just fine too, because again, everyone is kind of at the same level, right? So the balance is in this game is really comparative to other, players comparative to the same, other players in the same game at the same table.
Yeah. I think that's been accentuated more with the bounded accuracy things where you're kind of always going to be at that point, whereas in the 3rd and 4th edition and older rule sets, it wasn't as noticeable for differences like that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because there were so many other things that added up besides just your base stats.
And as I said, other than 3 sessions or two or 3 sessions, back in grade 10, I'm really only familiar with 5e. Right? So.
Well, we're getting close to past the time that I allowed for this.
I think I've given you a lot. This is gonna be a lot on the cutting room floor, I'm sure.
Why don't you? Is there anything you feel like you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, actually, I think we definitely hit all my high points and more. I think I talked about more than I thought I was going to.
Oh, cool. And the other final question I usually have for people is there any advice you'd want to give to other DMs?
If you're not already DM, do it. If you are a DM, then you probably you trial by error is fine. It really is. It is good to have a framework of what you want to do, but clearly, there are still parts of this world that I have not fully built out yet, and the reason why is because I want flexibility, and I think that's one of the things that is really is mandatory in DMing is you need to be flexible, you need to be able to change, and so it's nice to have a framework, but you want your players to actually interact and affect how things go, and so having some things
Yeah.
planned and a lot of things not is actually ideal, and it's not a failing. It's a positive. It's a plus.
Yeah. Gives you room to expand different things if your players need them or if you want them. Or
Right. I agree. So,
all right, cool. Well, thanks, Darrell, for coming on the show.
yeah, no, I was happy to be here. And if you like the sound of my voice and you want to hear more of me as a player, I play a cleric, Theo, and I play um a robot. It's technically a rogue bard, but it's really just a skills bot named TH30 in a ongoing campaign called Gold and Glory, GOLD and Glory, found on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and other places podcasts can be found.
Yep. And we'll put a link to that in the episode notes.
All right, I'll have to make sure I get that to you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Darrell.
All right, thank you very much. It was great talking.